Do you feel like there would have been a legitimizing of your faith if a martyrdom had happened? So you felt
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that would have been something that...
Find me worthy. Let me be worthy. That sort of thing. Because as in love with Jesus as I was also very frustrated because I felt like there was something I was missing in my walk with God, like a transcendence of, I don't know, I wanted to experience God in a sort of, I wanted him to confide in me.
Welcome to the 42 podcast, where a Christian and an atheist sit down to discuss the meanings of life, the universe, and everything else in between. Thank you for joining us. All right, good morning, Lindsey. How are you?
I'm good, Rob. It's good to be back.
Good to be back. Wow, where have we been?
How are you?
I'm good.
Good. You've recovered from last week?
A little badgered and bruised, I suppose.
I've talked to you about this off air, but I wanted to apologize for being really rude and stepping on your stepping on you all the time, and it was uncalled for, and I'm embarrassed and sorry.
Okay, apparently you and I listened to two different podcasts, because I didn't find you overly rude or abrasive or, well, in need of apologizing, but thank you. That is very gracious of you. So, and hey, that's part of the reason I appreciate these conversations with you, because you do give pushback, and I don't feel like you're assaulting me with the pushback.
Wow, I don't know who else you talk to, but I'm gonna try not to yell so much, not to get loud so frequently. But hey, actually, as an aside, sort of, I've been reading that book you suggested, Inspired, by Rachel Held Evans. It's so good. It's really, really good. I'm probably 2/3 of the way done, and I have to say that there's a chapter in there about war, about the genocide and the terrible things that happen in the Bible sometimes. And I like it because she doesn't excuse it. She doesn't try to explain it even, really. She faces it. And she does the best job talking about it that I've ever heard anybody else attempt.
That's why I thought you would appreciate that book, because she's approaching things in a way that you're asking questions from.
Mm-hmm.
And, I said this, I don't know if it was last episode or 2 episodes ago, where it's, I looked, I made my peace with it. I just don't have that poetic view, is maybe the best way to phrase that. That is gracious in providing a context at looking at it. But I made my peace with what the Old Testament was, and some of the stories of the Old Testament. That has put me in a position where I see how grace fits in. Not perfectly, because we're not perfect people, but there's grace, and God's moving in a way that's trying to bring that grace out. That's my perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I appreciate that. I can.
I
do.
I'm glad that you're enjoying that book, and that it's providing a unique view that you've never encountered before.
I haven't gotten angry or upset while reading it. It's really interesting. And in between every chapter, she does this bit where she writes sort of like fan fiction. And this is my favorite part of the book, honestly, is her take on, she's surprised me with her perspective. Like, I read one this morning about the woman at the well, and I've written stuff about the woman at the well too, and I always paint her as a harlot, or like as somebody who's slept around a ton. She paints her as a widow who's been widowed 4 times, like Tamar in Genesis. And I thought, why didn't I think of that before? That's brilliant. She puts a fresh spin on some of these stories. And the one she did about Hagar too it was so good. It was so good.
I don't know, I guess I'll stand in defense of the woman at the well. I've never looked at her hard as like, oh, she has to be a harlot. But I've looked at her and gone, in those times, for who she was she was doing the best that she could because, I mean, she's a woman 2,000 years ago. If you lose a husband, whether he divorces you or because you're widowed, your life is pretty much done. I mean, your options are go and become a prostitute, or hope you have children old enough to care for you, or die on the street. And you know, that's how I've kind of always looked at her. If, for whatever reason, don't know why, because we're not given that context, she's in a rough spot. And she tried to make the best of it, and I think that's what Christ is seeing in each of us. And that's... I'm starting to sermonize. I'll stop. For me, that's what I've always seen, where it's Christ is trying to see the best in us at our worst. So...
That's a good bullet point. I like that.
All right, great bullet point. We're done. Podcast over. All right, so moving a little bit aside, if you're okay from this, and we'll jump back into this kind of talk, but I want to geek out for a minute.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah, come at me.
All right. Come at you? All right. Well, I sent you a text message right before we started. Mm-hmm. And I said, don't open it until we get into this. So go ahead and open that text message. And tell me what you see. I sent you a picture.
Okay. It's a space rover, something.
All right, so this is really cool. I like space. I'm a space geek in some ways. Mm-hmm. That is 2.2 or 7. I don't remember what the actual price tag, but it was somewhere in the $2 billion rover hanging mid-air over the Martian surface.
Really?
On a sky crane. They call it a sky crane, and it's this jet-powered or rocket-powered jetpack that they attach to the rover, and then they fly it down onto Mars. The thing hovers there for a couple seconds, lowers the rover, and then flies off and crashes.
Oh.
That's
cool. Except for the crash part, but that's cool. It'd be cool if they didn't have to crash.
They don't know how else to land that thing. But still, the fact that we're at a position in space exploring where we're like, hey, this is a great idea. Let's hang billions of dollars on 3 cables on a planet millions of miles away, running on an autonomous program that we don't have any control over, and let's see if we can stick the landing.
No pressure, guys.
Yeah, no, this is the second time they've done that.
Wow.
And that rover is about the size of a Mini Cooper. So, I mean, that's a sizable thing that they're just like, we're just going to fly it around Mars and drop it there.
That's amazing. That's pretty cool. Yeah. I like that stuff too.
Yeah, I made my kids watch the landing process with me, and they're like, "Oh, yay, space, so cool." Oh, wait, they're doing what now? Yeah, it was fun. It was neat. That just happened on Thursday, and you know, it takes me back to I was about my son's age when we landed the first rover on Mars in '97, and that was the one where they, you know, just put airbags around the thing and bounced it on the surface until it stopped. But it's just, it's neat. I'm done. I'm geeking out. So, but all right. We've spent 2 episodes talking about faith.
Yeah.
Poking me, proverbial, I can't get that lastly.
Proverbially.
Thank you.
Proverbially. Good question.
Words are hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. We spent the past couple of episodes proverbially poking me with a stick, and I think we kind of need to finish up, I suppose.
Maybe.
Where
do you think we left off exactly?
I think we left off with a lot of things just kind of not unfinished, but maybe the best way to look at this is, how are we doing?
Right.
Yeah, we did 2 episodes on science and evolution and faith, and then this would be 2.5 right now, episodes on the faith aspects. And I think maybe that's the better place to sit with okay, the beer mugs are all empty and it's the end of the night. How are we doing?
I think for me, the choice that you have is to somehow reconcile things in the Bible that seem to be in opposition to each other, or seem to contrast so heavily that God changes so much from the Old Testament to the New Testament. So I don't know if I'll ever be able to truly reconcile that, but actually, weirdly, the Rachel Held Evans book kind of encouraged me that maybe it's okay to question that. That's maybe the point, is generating conversation and tossing that football back and forth, and maybe not having satisfaction, and not having, maybe you're just not going to know whether you believe in God or not.
Can I ask you a question? Where I see you're pondering and kind of tossing this around in your mind. Can I ask you a question I think is a piece of the root of this?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
For you, growing up, as a teenager, as a young adult, what was the value of a question in your house and in your belief system?
I wasn't discouraged from questions, but my mom will tell you they didn't know how to answer my questions. And she'll tell you that. So I only really went to a couple people that only had one point of view who did know, who did sort of have answers. But I always felt like I had to hedge in on my questions with like respect, or like I couldn't really allow myself to think the thoughts to get me to really ask the questions fully. So I don't know. I wasn't shamed for asking questions, but I felt kind of like...
So you felt like you had to dance around kind of the heart of a question you might have, where it's...
Yeah.
I can't exactly ask this in fullness because it might offend, or my faith might...
It caused problems, or it made my parents frustrated. And this is my perspective. Maybe my mom has a different perspective, but it seemed like my questions just frustrated her. Or her responses were just, you just have to have faith. And those kind of answers that were really unsatisfying for me. So I don't know if that answers your question fully, but...
No, I mean, it does, because your reaction to, well, you just have to have faith, is to kind of bristle at that and okay, well, I want to fight that. I want something a little more solid. And I think that helps give perspective to what you've been thinking, feeling, and experiencing in the course of this conversation, because you said this early on where, I don't know, maybe episode 1 or 2, where it's, for me, there is no taboo question. I'll walk through anything with anyone as best as I can, and my stance has been, and I say this to my students all the time, ask anything you want. If I don't have an answer to it, we'll work to find it together. And we may never find an answer, but we can work to find it together. Or if it's too personal, I'll tell you, nope, that's a line in the sand. We're not going to go down that route. But for me, it has always been a journey of curiosity and question, not needing to have a solidified faith. There was a time where it was, that faith has to be that solid brick wall. But even then, that brick wall only got so high before I was like, this doesn't make sense.
I have a pretty active imagination, and my relationship with God has always been very, as personal as I can make it, trying to envision what it would be like to sit next to Jesus, and like, if Jesus drank coffee, how would he drink his coffee? What would make him laugh? Like, I love the image of, I love Jesus. I mean, from the time I was really young, I kind of clung to these portions in the scriptures that almost talk about God or Jesus, God as this person that you could have a relationship with on a fairly intimate level. In Isaiah 55 or something, it says, "For I, the Lord, am your husband." And it has that kind of bridal groom imagery wrapped throughout the Bible, from beginning to end, really. And so that's the image that I had of God as this loving person that was sitting next to me in church, that wanted to confide in me, like how Jesus is talking of God, and he says he speaks what God speaks to him. He only says what God tells him to say and goes where God tells him to go. And I wanted that for myself. I really, really wanted that to be true.
Did you feel like the church brought you up in that relational nature of Christianity, or do you feel like the church was distracted by, I'll call it power, with the desire for power and influence?
I didn't see that in my church, my particular church. The people in my life had like a romance with God, and they made it extremely attractive to be so close to God that he whispers things into your spirit and tells you things and confides in you and tells you, you know, where to go and who to speak to. And I don't know how to get more specific than that exactly, but I saw intimacy in, and there was power attached to it, because, or not power, authority. Just like I don't have to ask my parents to come in their house. I just walk in because I'm their daughter. So in the same way, I'm God's daughter, and it's just a given that I can just come into the throne room and give him my heart and tell him what I need, what I would like, with the caveat that he knows best, but this dual thing going on that he's already given it to us. Like, God's already given us everything pertaining to life and godliness. Like, that's a promise. So I had this really very, very poignant, rich relationship with this person, but all my questions kind of tore that down, stood in contrast to my image of Jesus sitting next to me and being with me and wanting me to reach out to him just as much as he wants to reach out to me. That stood in contrast to the God who was there in the conquest of Canaan, in all those houses and villages and cities and temples. And I guess it's hard for me to reconcile the two things. You know, it just seems so offensive and contrary.
So, you said this in the last episode where you are extremely empathetic. So to a degree, kind of that relational and romantic nature that you spoke to with God is what you applied to God in entirety, and then going back and seeing these moments of destruction, seeing these hard moments in Scripture came in stark, harsh contrast. And then even tying that in towards your empathetic, your envisioning then of the relationship with God became, yeah, I'll say soured, because your application then also became, at what point would this become me? Is that maybe a fair statement?
Yeah, putting myself in the place of even the Israelites, putting myself in their place, or, yeah, would God do that to me? Would God cut my head off too? Would God kill my children? Things like that. I mean, if I was just born in a different time in space, would that have been my same fate? But at the same time, doesn't God love me? It's very confusing to hold those two things together.
Okay, can I ask you something from the intro you did for the Defector podcast?
Mm-hmm.
In that, you always held to how you wanted to be a martyr in faith.
Mm-hmm.
And now you are what was the word you used? You wanted to be a martyr, now you're a...
I can't remember. I said it was a defector.
Okay.
I don't remember.
We'll stick with defector. I think you used a different word, but either way, you wanted to be a martyr, now you're a defector. And just out of that, I don't know, I with what you're saying, with what was there, I feel like there's a contradiction where there was a degree of violence you desired in your life, but then there's a degree of terror about that violence.
I think I wanted God to know that I was willing to go to the ends of the earth, to the front lines, no matter what that meant. If that meant violence, then I wouldn't do the violence. I wanted to be available to be in that spot. And if it happened, I'm willing. That's kind of, it's not like I craved violence so much as use me sort of thing.
Right, and it's just that kind of, there's a fine line there, but I'm asking. Honestly, I'm exploring where you're at to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
And we're dissecting a bit of where your faith was. Do you feel like there would have been a legitimizing of your faith if a martyrdom had happened? So you felt
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that would have been something that,
Find me worthy. Let me be worthy. That sort of thing.
okay.
Yeah, because as in love with Jesus as I was also very frustrated because I felt like there was something I was missing in my walk with God, like a transcendence of, I don't know, I wanted to experience God in a sort of, I wanted him to confide in me. And I felt like sometimes I couldn't tell what was my emotions, what was me being excited, what was me being really romantic and imaginative. What was the difference between those feelings and what was actually true? Was I making this stuff up? Is this really happening? So I would doubt that it was from God, that the way I felt, the way I was living, was it all my own working myself up in like a frenzy of whatever? And how do I know what's true? If God spoke to me, or if he used somebody else to speak to me, or give me some kind of like, yeah, you're on the right track. Here's this, like, a word of knowledge or a dream or some kind of indication that it's not just me being totally swept up. Because I have a lot of energy. I have a lot of zeal. I have a lot of passion. But I've always felt like it was sort of not directed. Like it was just, I just had it and it was painful almost because I didn't have anywhere for it to go except for when I was in that discipleship program with you. For a long time, that was the highlight of my life. For a long time, that was the closest I had ever felt with God, as because I had somewhere for all that energy to go. Specifically, weirdly, on stage, like doing some of those dramas, I was like connected to God in a way that, and I still have nightmares about it. So it's not like there's negatives too.
Do you remember the I don't remember which drama it was called, but it was you and I paired up for one scene where I was the angry, abusive husband and you were the... I don't remember the drama.
Yeah.
It was the dancing
Rewind?
one.
Was it Rewind?
No, it wasn't.
Oh,
Wait,
yeah.
maybe it was.
Resurrection.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, drama's not my thing. But
I needed an outlet, and that was a good outlet for me.
which is good. And I think that was the intention of those discipleship programs in that time frame, was to provide outlets, to provide means for understanding and expression for, like, I look at myself in that time frame, and I am not a good traditional college student by any means. So for me, in that time frame, that program provided a hands-on access to ministry and college programming, and that was the needed outlet. Now, aspects of that have soured, and my own nightmares are there with it, but it provided the access I needed in that time frame. And since then, I figured out how to be a college student, I guess 3 degrees later, however many degrees I'm in. But, it took that channeling and kind of understanding of myself to get kicked in that direction. And maybe that's something to look at. I guess I don't look at that time period as a high point in my life, but as a forging.
So there was some forging for you going on too at that program, and
There was, and I think there are a bunch of negatives, but there are also moments that were refining, and refinement hurts. But to a degree, I think there might be elements of that you're still wrestling with from that refining, from that focus.
yeah, in a way, I was not satisfied. Yeah, I was expecting God to really speak to me in a tangible way. I didn't know how, but I craved it. And when I graduated and it didn't really happen, and I didn't know where to go, I was really disappointed. So for years after that, I would go back to that place. I would go back, hang out with those people, and be with those people because I still craved it. I still craved something, because I just felt so wasted. And not in a fun way.
No, that's next week's episode when we drink aviation gin and talk about pop culture and hidden jokes. Is there a moment in your life when you can look and say, I think that was the voice of God?
I can't really think of anything right now on the spot.
No, and that's okay.
But I guess, like, sometimes I would be in church or at youth group, mostly at youth group, and somebody would be really sticking out to me, and they'd be like, I couldn't get them off my mind, and I'd go over to them and talk to them or pray for them or ask to pray for them, and it turns out, like, that they needed me, that somehow something was going on. Actually, and that happened too. I was at somebody's house in this youth program thing. I was visiting one person, and while I was there, I had this super heavy feeling like I needed to go visit this other person. Very strong. So I drove over there right away. I walked in the house. I went into her bedroom, and she was crying. She was really upset. And I just sat with her, and she cried, and I prayed, and we talked, and I felt like that was like a superpower moment for me. But not in like a weird, I don't want to make that, I just felt like I was really listening. Like I felt like I had done the thing that needed to be done at the time it needed to be done. And it felt really good to be used by God like that.
Even in your description of it, I mean, you didn't go into any major details, but I mean, what you're describing in this moment, I can envision kind of how you would play it out in your head. You know, you kick down the door and in comes the...
Exactly! That's exactly what it is! You know me well now.
But I would argue with you that that's not... I would argue with you that that is the nudging of the Spirit to be there for people in need. Not so much the voice of God.
Well, I don't see a difference, I guess.
I do. There's the nudgings of the Spirit to check in, to be there for people, but then there's...
Like a vision or God speaking to you through another person?
No, like this very clearly defined moment that I can only say transcends anything else, where it's a very clear, just kind of... I might get the prophet wrong, but I think it was Elijah who was in the cave in the mountain, and there was a windstorm and God wasn't in it, and there was a firestorm and God wasn't in it, and there was something else and God wasn't in it. And then there was this silence, this deafening silence that fell. And it's in that moment that he looks and goes, oh, okay, God's in that, and now I need to be terrified. It's kind of like that all at once, is the way I would describe it, where there's this uproar with silence. And I'm delineating between, nudges of the Spirit and the voice of God, because I think they do two different things. I think voice of God affirms and moves in an individual's life with God speaking directly to the individual, and nudges of the Spirit are going out and helping. That's why I delineate the two.
I've definitely never felt that then. It's only sort of been like a thing that after the fact, I could be like, that could have been me. Something that could be explained, but I believed it was God, Like I really felt like it was me, but it could have been something. It could have just been that I was really in tune and I knew what was going on in her life. So yeah, it's explainable, but I believed very strongly that it was God doing it in me. And actually, as a Christian, you're supposed to not take credit for things. So technically, I would have said it was God anyway, even if I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I'm asking this out of curiosity, again, with the expectation that you seem to have and this desire for those moments. And if there are moments that you can quantify as coming close to that.
To God actually,
speaking in you, or we could also apply the speaking through you.
I don't think so. I think I told you, one of the directors talked to me, gave me a word, about the salt thing. Like, I felt like that was God, but I didn't know how to apply it. It was useless, sort of, because, so in a way, nothing changed from it.
Words of prophecy can be tricky too. So I guess this is the point I'm going to kind of pull back a bit, because we've gone into areas of faith that can be, I call them razor's edge conversations, because you can fall hard to one side or another in the voice of God is in everything and it speaks through me, and it becomes a tool of manipulation, or the voice of God or the nudging of the Spirit tells me this, that, or the other, or then there is no voice of God. There is no nudgings of the Spirit, which is why I call it a razor's edge, because, I mean, you're trying to walk that tightrope of how God works and moves, but in a manner that isn't going into a manipulative or total denial, from my perspective. And I'm asking these questions because these are areas of hunger and thirst that you have expressed from when you had faith, when you were actively in the church, in the young adult program, in ministry aspects.
Yeah.
But now they seem to have turned as sour notes for you. And just kind of looking at that, asking.
I'm nostalgic for it, honestly. One time, one guy from the youth program, I was it was a mixed group, so there was boys and girls, and it was my second year, so maybe we felt, oh no, it was my first year, and we felt we could, I guess it was okay that we were talking for some reason. And I was sort of expressing some of these frustrations of wanting God to speak to me or whatever. And this guy said, "Oh, you've never been broken. You're not broken." And like that explained.
So that explained where and why you were feeling those things?
Yeah. God wasn't going to do the thing I wanted him to do, or use me in the way I wanted God to do what he wanted. That I wanted God to do what he wanted to do in me. God wasn't going to do that until I had been broken. And I had nothing to be broken of, I didn't think at the time. He was right. I didn't have drama. I didn't have anything. Yeah, go ahead.
I remember this very clearly.
Really?
I do. Because at that time, I would pick him up and drop him off in the mornings and evenings. So in the morning, he and I would talk as we drove into the program, and at the evening we would talk and kind of digest the day together going home from the program. And, that whole thing came up because later on that became an issue that needed to be addressed, because it was, a guy and a girl talking together. And he was frustrated and deeply hurt by how the end result of that played out, because it was, you're someone who needed ministry.
Yeah.
And just how does that balance out in the end? But he expressed some of those things, and he and I talked through some of the ministry aspects of that brokenness, what it is for, Christianese, as we say, to be broken and to be at that lowest point and have nothing but God. And again, you and I have even talked around that as well at different points. I don't know if we've ever talked directly on the podcast about some of it. I can't remember. We're getting to that point of the podcast. I can't remember everything. But yeah, I mean, that is a fair assessment, where there is a bottom of the barrel brokenness, and what do you turn to? It's even to a degree why there's that phrase, there are no atheists in foxholes.
Yeah.
Your life can end. What are you going to turn to? So even to this day, you would again apply that you don't feel like there's ever anything that you had to be broken of in your time period of journeying in faith.
Looking at my life now, I feel like this is a trick question.
No.
I've never not believed in God before. And I don't know if that... See, I overthink things, and this is why I could never accomplish anything, is I don't know if coming to the end of my faith and walking away or putting it down or what have you has been... I don't know what it is except for brokenness or wanting to not really live anymore, honestly, because things are hard, or I can't get into it, but I think I sort of have lived there.
Okay. Can I ask, if it wasn't faith, what brought you out of that time period? And you can say no, this is that line in the sand, too personal.
I just think my perspective has changed or softened, or I guess I made a decision to fight for what I wanted. For fighting for my marriage, fighting for my kids, and that helped pull me out of my spiral that I was in.
Okay. We don't have to go any deeper on that one. Hey. You're doing great. You're doing great. Thumbs up over here, alright? I've asked you a lot of questions. Kind of diving deep into some of the things, and it's only fair if I allow you to ask similar questions of me, of these moments, of these challenges. And, we talk about, to a degree, how we came to different conclusions with similar backgrounds, but there are differences.
Did you feel a transcendent moment? Did you feel transcendence of some kind, or that thing that we're talking about ever? That thing you want, like in worship time. That thing you pursue. Have you ever felt that? Or heard it?
Once.
Where were you?
I don't remember exactly where the church was, but I was at a church, and this was at I'll call it turning point in my life. There were kind of a couple different paths I could have gone, and there was a definite darkness in my heart, in my being at that time. And you knew me years ago. You knew me in the young adult ministry, and those time periods of my life I look back on, and I was a lot more hellfire and brimstone. At least that's my perspective. And some of that just came out of anger from my life for life, with life. So there's this point in my life where I was facing multiple paths, and I was angry. I was hurt. I was broken. I was in a dark place. And it was just a couple words that I can't account for. They're not words that I would say. I don't even know if I could say it's a language I would use. But those words spoke, and the best way I could describe what was that moment moving on was I was unmade in a lot of ways. And it set me on the path that eventually took me to the young adult program, that eventually took me to where I met my wife, where I am now, with what I'm doing now. I mean, this is a divergence point that I see in my life, and I have no other way to explain what happened other than to quantify that was the voice of God in a really dark, hard moment of my life, and it was nudging me in the direction that I think God wanted. There's one moment that I can quantify as definitively and clearly that transcendent voice of God in my life. I've never heard it again. I've never had an experience like that again. I've had experiences. I've had moments of encountering the Spirit in worship, but I've never had that kind of transcendent God whisper. Again, Elijah, I think it's Elijah, I have to look it up, but Elijah and the God is not in the storm, God's not in the firestorm, he's in that quiet, still whisper that is heard as loud as a shout is as gentle as a lamb and as fierce as a lion. I mean, it's a contradiction in so many ways, because if you encounter it, you're just like, I have been unmade.
Is that from a scripture?
I think it's Isaiah, and when Isaiah, yeah, is it Isaiah? When he goes into the courts and has the coal touched to his lips.
Yeah, okay. I knew it sounded familiar. Interesting. I like the idea of contradiction in the Bible because, first off, just from a literary perspective, it's really interesting because that is exactly what we've been talking about, is contradiction. What looks like a contradiction, and look at Isaiah, like what you just said, the lion and the lamb and the shout and the whisper and the God, but the meek baby too. Like, what?
And again, I mean, this is my perspective. This is me speaking Christianese, but it's, if we honestly look and examine the heart and nature of God, he's the one who made everything. And for him to enter into creation, for him to enter into our lives, he can, speaking figuratively, unmake and make us at once. Which is why, I look at that moment and I go, I was unmade, but I was whole. The words to quantify that moment will always fall short. The best example of it is that existing in contradiction, because it was all things and it was nothing.
Interesting.
So, but yes, I have experienced one definitive moment of that God whisper that I look at and go, that was at a crossroads of my life, and I do attribute it to a good portion of where I am now and why I am where I'm at now.
You received your calling, your mission. That was your sword in the stone moment, your Excalibur moment. How was it not?
Because there's another moment that is that sword in the stone Excalibur moment, and that one wasn't delivered to me. That one wasn't in any way given to me of what my calling would be. And that one I actually ran from for a long time.
So was this before or after the
Long
unmaking?
before.
Okay, so that was like your Jonah, go to Nineveh and you ran the other way type thing?
Yeah, that would actually be a very accurate description. That was very much the, get swallowed by a whale and digested, or go to Nineveh. By the way, I'll puke you up at Nineveh.
And the thing that you heard, or the thing that God told you, you felt like it was to be a pastor or something? Or to be what you are?
No, it was never a clear delineation of, oh, you're going to be a pastor. I'm not a pastor. My official title is Director of Children and Youth Ministries.
That's cool. It's long.
It is a very long title. I just use youth director. No, my calling and my heart and my passion for the church, for ministry, is just that. The title doesn't matter to me anymore. It mattered when I was a lot younger, when I was in my mid-20s, but now it doesn't. Because, again, that was kind of a wrestling point with what was this kind of calling that was spoken into my life against what is where I'm at, and making my peace with it. And part of that peace is just even looking and saying, the greatest thing that I might do in fulfilling that calling is just raising my children. And that's a part of the peace I had to come to grips with and make with it, because it wasn't, this clear cut, okay, here's your life's course charted in every detail. It was, go that way. And just keep going. Mm-hmm. And you're going to hit all kinds of bumps and bruises and cliffs and hills, and it was just go that way. And, that vague aspect of that calling of just go that way is hard to deal with, Because does it go that way, and am I going to do these great and amazing things that are my perception in the world? Or is it as simple as I've had a child who I'm going to try and raise to be a
Mm-hmm.
kind and gracious human being? And maybe that's the end fulfillment of it. So, no, I've never had this, like, clear-cut, go with God to be a pastor. No, that never happened. So, it was just you're going this direction, you're going to keep going this direction, and I'll send a whale at some point to spit you back out on the right way.
Hmm.
And again, they're broad terms, but yes.
That's what I wanted, was a sword in the stone moment. That the music and the lights and, you know, the chorus, the angels singing in the background.
But here's the thing. Even your defining of what is my sword in the stone moment, it's anticlimactic. It's uneventful.
What do you mean?
I wasn't even the one who experienced it. It was someone else who. All right, I'm gonna stop beating around the bush. Hi, Mom. It was my mother who, I'm the eldest child of 4, and when I was born, she spent time just praying over me, praying over who I would be, and she feels, and I hold my mother and my grandmother's faith in a very high esteem because in a lot of ways it helped me understand, deal with, and grow in my own faith. But she feels that she had this very clear spirit nudge when I was just a child of he's going to be in ministry and he's going to do, I don't remember the exact phrasing of it, but he'll do things in ministry that are great. I love my mother, I do. But growing up with that, kind of, it felt like Damocles' sword just hanging over my head for a majority of my life. Of, okay, I'm going to do great things in ministry. Am I like the next Billy Graham, or am I the crazy sidewalk prophet
Right.
on the corner? And, navigating that, early on it gave me a complex. But I've made my peace with it. And, again, the only thing that my mother ever did that was nudging in my career, and at the time I was mad at her, now I'm not. When I was 17, 18, I was seriously considering taking a route that would have gone military. I wanted to go and I wanted to be a Marine. She kept hanging up on recruiters. I mean, every time they called the house, they got hung up on, and not like, oh no, he's not available. They would be, hi, my name is Lev from the United States Marine. Click. And if she
That's
was
pretty
feeling
funny.
especially polite, it would be, you're not getting my son. Click. So that's the only
Wow.
point that I can look at and say, yeah, my mother did have a hard hand in guiding my career, not into the military. Everything else she's been a gracious support to, but not, oh, you're going to be, you will be a pastor. She hasn't done that to me.
I had that sort of thing happen to me in that vague way too. Not very specifically, but I had a woman in my life who would brag about me to people when we met people. And she just like always said these amazing things about me, which was nice of her, but I didn't know what that meant. And I didn't know, okay, I have this zeal and passion, and she thinks I'm good at this stuff, administration, but there's no attached call. So I just sort of waited around and twiddled my thumbs and went to a youth program where I thought maybe I would get like a specific go to here and do this thing. You're going to be a pastor, or you're going to be a missionary, or you're going to do this. And it never came. So I went to school and majored in English and wasted a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, even looking at the chart of my life, I can't say that that moment defined or clarified any aspect of what I would be doing or where I am now. it just set, again, that go in that direction. And it's going to be lots of bumps along the way. You know, I can't even sit down today and say, hey, I have fulfilled what I do believe God spoke to my mother. I can't say that has happened. And I've made the peace in my life of, you know what, I will never know. I won't. And so what I keep doing is I keep working with, pouring into, and trying to be there for my students. I keep working with and trying to be there for my family. And I keep working with and within the church to try and, you know, continue to show the love of Christ in this world. I'm not perfect at any of this. All I can do is interact as a flawed, broken human and hope that where I fail, the Spirit flows out. That's my perspective. You know, it's been a weird journey to get to where I am. You know, it only took me 10 years to get a bachelor's degree. You know, here I am, and there are moments I have seen and felt and understand the Spirit nudges have happened in my life, and there are moments that I don't fully understand just yet, but trust that someday I will. Any other questions?
Not off the top of my head. I asked all the questions last week and the week before.
We've had a lot of intense conversations. We've had a lot of, you know, back and forths with science and evolution and creationism, with faith, with questions of faith. And yeah, here we are.
Yep, here we are. Interesting. It's good for food for thought. I mean, it's definitely got me thinking a lot.
Thinking and questions are never a bad thing. Anyone who tells you differently is selling you something. Sorry.
Okay, Wesley.
By the way, that is the standard movie for all youth ministry people. And if you want to fight me on that, I will fight you on that, and you will lose. For clarity, that's The Princess Bride. Well, all right then. I guess this is a good point to wrap it up. This has been a good conversation.
Yeah, I think it was necessary to have a chilled out conversation where I wasn't beating you about the head and shoulders.
Yeah, well. But that's part of the point of this, where we can have intense conversations and we can have relaxed conversations. So, and next week we're going to... What's a favorite childhood movie of yours? I think I've asked this before, but what's a favorite childhood movie of yours?
Beauty and the Beast. It was a big one for me.
All right. Rewatch it this week.
Okay.
All right. And just see if there are any moments that pop up to you like, whoa.
Okay.
If I got to pick a classic Disney, I think I'm going to pick Aladdin.
Mm-hmm.
I miss Robin Williams. I love him.
Me too.
Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I got to pick Aladdin. But let's go through and next week get some aviation gin and sit down and go, oh, that was in a childhood movie? All right.
Looking forward to it.
I am too. Lindsay, are we still friends?
Absolutely.
A lot easier to be friends after not duking it out.
Yeah. Yep.
It has been good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we'll see you next week.
See you.